today. And as you can remember, yesterday I had a difficult task of my boss of writing and also chairing. So if I have not captured, I'm relying on you as we're doing the rapporteuring. So I think many of the things will be captured and maybe. It is a great pleasure for me to welcome you again this morning to the second roundtable discussion on equity in Africa, intra-African trade-induced industrialization and integration. And as Timani, we are delighted to be here at Kigali, in Kigali, because we find it as symbolical to be here for this event and this roundtable because of what happened here in March 2018. And we also believe that the AFCTA belongs to all Africans, and it depends on all Africans to achieve its mission. And therefore, it was important that we also congregate at this city. This roundtable attracted people from different sectors: policy making, academia, and civil society, private sector. It was not just an academic conference, but it also drew from experiences that are practical for people who are in industry and those who are really have already started the journey of trade and integration in Africa. So yesterday we had meaningful engagement and active participation throughout the day, which started with Professor Gumede, who officially opened this event and acknowledged all participants and co-hosts of the event. In his opening address, he challenged us to think deeper about what we mean by industrialization or integration. Whether do we refer to increasing manufacturing, and if so, is this what industrialization entails in the broader sense of the word? And when he was talking about regional integration as well, he also questioned, what exactly do we decide? A political unity that will seek us to revisit the debates and ideals of the Monrovia and the Casablanca bloc? Or do we want to follow the EU model? And how do we integrate politically without doing away with the current borders? The next session was a facilitation by Remy Parker, and it took place immediately after the opening address, which was quite an eye-opener and very interactive. For some of us who were new to the idea of a living lab, and how I wish that it came in the afternoon when our energy levels were dropping. Apart from serving as an icebreaker to the event, because we danced, we also got to know about the different forms of greetings that we have here on the continent. It helped us also to rethink and practically visualize in real terms what this intra-Africa trade will look like. And the session also introduced us to various methods and tools of the Living Lab. And we look forward to the report that will come from this Living Lab initiative. Immediately after, the keynote address was delivered by Prudence Bahizi on behalf of Dr. Trevor Mapanga, who was supposed to be here but is currently on leave. And Prudence emphasized that the African Union values stakeholder engagement, and they really welcomed this event. And he took us through the journey of establishing AFCTA until the signing of the comprehensive and mutually benefiting trade agreement in Kigali this year. And the ideal was to create a single market for Africa. He also highlighted all the protocols that have been already signed and those who are still outstanding, such as the investment, the intellectual property protocol, and the competition protocol. And his address contextualized AFCTA and gave us the status of where we are and where we should be heading. For instance, he also cited that at the moment, 49 out of 54 countries signed the agreement, and 6 other countries ratified recently in Mauritania. Immediately afterwards, Prudence delivered his own paper because he was also scheduled to be a speaker in this event. And he provided the rationale for AFCTA as a flagship project of the Agenda 2063, tracing back the establishment of the Lagos Plan of Action and the Abuja Treaty. And in his presentation, he outlined the institutional framework for AFCTA. He spelled its provisions and annexes and the special committee that were proposed. I think the key thing to remember is that there will be a transitional period, as he argued yesterday, of 1 to 2 years before enforcement of this policy. So the fourth session was sharing of experiences and analysis by the regional bodies such as the UNECA, NEPAD, and UNDP. Andrew Mould was the first presenter from UNECA, and he outlined the challenges of why we see fast growth with no structural transformation. And he tried to mention some of these as failure of industrial policy, extremely expensive credit, intense competition, and weak domestic demands. He gave us several country comparisons to make his argument and came to the conclusion that manufacturing is crucial, and he used the case of Uganda and Vietnam as to show that. The role of FDIs also cannot be underestimated. And his presentation proposed solutions which he believes rest in making policy more effective by learning from the experiences of our peers. He also suggested that countries need to work more closely and coordinate across the EAC. He also said they must make use of available policy space, introduce measures to strengthen domestic demand, and tackle the problem of lack of credit, and make after AFCTA work. Sorry, the acronym AFCFTA work. I need to be slow to get this acronym right. And Mr. Fitzam Abraham, who is the economic advisor to the UNDP, also presented on the 4 Ps in fast-tracking continental free trade areas. And his presentation aimed at discussing the key ideas, concepts, and ways of working that the UNDP proposes on CSPs, and also to advance shared understanding across policy and operational units of what CSP should achieve in terms of their functions and the parameters of the structure. And he introduced 3 concepts that will help us understand the CSPs as integration, acceleration, and accelerators. And here by acceleraters, he's referring to interventions that focus on interconnections with and across SDGs and Agenda 2063, which will target investments and policies to push forward in order to quickly achieve the goals. So the UN's role in developing and sustaining SCPs was outlined in detail, as well as what will it take also to launch CSPs. In terms of whether the AU and the UNDP can drive trade, he argued that the UNDP is actually the development wing of the UN. Also, the work of the UNDP ranges from development and management of programs and projects, advocacy on certain development key issues. And also, the UNDP is a trusted partner and a friend of governments, CSOs, private sector, philanthropies, and media. He further also mentioned that over the years, the UNDP has accumulated significant knowledge and skills from long experiences. And its presence on the ground in all member states of the UN is also something that is significant for us to also remember, and has a broad professional asset and various expertise of its own. And in summing up, Mr. Abraham indicated that the UNDP supports the new move to establish the AU Development Agency, and it is also ready to work and share experiences with NEPAD and the new agency. His presentation was followed by Dr. Lugato, who shared her frustrations of seeing plan after plan with minimal implementation, and instead with resorting to name changes while retaining the same content. And she termed this phenomenon an implementation trust deficit, which she argues was responsible for the duplication of plans. And she argued that in our euphoria and excitement for new plans, we really use our past experience to learn, not just about ourselves, but about others in relation to ourselves. How do we use this experience for AFCTA? The experiences of NEPAD and all these other plans that came before. And participants also asked whether Africa should trade with continents or countries. There's also a situation where there's competition for donor fund between countries and RECs, or RECs and the continent. Even capacity building in Africa depends on external bodies. So other people in the room argue that currently a preferential market does not favor Africa. Others contend that we also need to make our leaders uncomfortable so that we can see progress. So the presentation concluded that we need to adopt a different mindset in doing trade agreements. Session 4 was a panel moderated by Dr. Ololuntu, focusing on defining roles and responsibilities of stakeholders. The panel members in this session included Jessica from AAPM, Justine from Borderless, and Kiburu from PASSING. And in this panel, capacity building beyond the institutions of learning was raised as an issue to be taken into account. The AAPM submission challenged us to think of other informal ways of building capacity other than with formal training, formal institutions of learning. And the submission by Borderless pointed to the practical challenges of the so-called free movements on the continent, using West Africa as an example. Justin talked about the disparities of payments at entry points in the West African region. Also corruption where officials solicit bribes from traders, non-compliance issues by countries, and all of that. And the submission from PASSING highlighted that as they engage with business, they realize that in fact tariff is not much of a problem, but customs and transport issues are major issues for traders. So it was felt that the voice of the private sector has not been adequately captured, and AFCFTA needs to ensure intentionally sort this out. If it's difficult to make partnerships with countries, why not partner with organizations, other organizations such as ADB, African Development Bank? And from the floor, participants argued that FDI needs to be used strategically. Others also felt that civil society has to be competent enough to implement policies, because politicians come and go, but civil society will remain. The next presentation was by Ms. Thando Songwevu, an entrepreneur and a South African Heritage Ambassador, who presented a case study of an initiative known as Chart Africa, which is a living lab conceived to promote community development frameworks and solutions to foster interdisciplinary research, development, and implementation approaches to sectors. So Chart Africa has been conceived to have optimal focus in African countries with the aim to create and promote increased continentalism, cross-border business interaction in Chart sectors. So basically Chart works to develop, aims to develop a business-driven initiative for rural development, women, youth, and entrepreneur based on collaborative partnerships with Africa's multilateral intergovernmental structures, policymakers, academic research institutions, and international partners. This was a perfect example of demonstrating the ideals and the practical experience of integration and what it will look like, what integration will look like. So the last presentation by Heini Soneman from UNECA focused on trade-induced industrialization, which terms the smart protectionism. She argued that so far trade has yielded limited transformation. Globalization also contributed by allowing the domination of small number of firms. She argued that strategic trade policy needs to balance two things. One, the incentives for innovation and development, and the second one, protection of infant industries from premature competition. Industrialization policy needs to be linked with national development plans, and protectionism can only be reduced when trade advances. Some of the challenges that smart protectionism might face include how to select industries that need support, how to protect selected industries, or whether industries should be protected in the first place. And some of the concerns that were raised from the floor included her questions such as how will Africa catch up with the 4IR as it has not yet caught up with the third industrial revolution. And also the reason why regional integration is so low has to do with global politics. Others felt strong that trade cannot be the precondition for industrialization. We will need to recapture domestic and regional export markets. Another issue not to be neglected was also the historical terrain that gave rise to some of these issues. Sometimes governments are preoccupied with what they can do within sovereign nation rather than with global economy. There was a debate also about whether MDGs reduce poverty or not, which Ms. Haney responded that indeed MDGs alleviated poverty at country levels, but not much at the regional level. This was the last presentation of the day, and the meeting adjourned at 6 p.m. We are looking forward to the outcomes of this gathering. And colleagues, let me thank you all for your thought-provoking presentation and insights and for your active involvement from the floor. I wish you fruitful deliberations throughout the day as we strive to make a better Africa. Thank you.